This is Ray Mofield. We're visiting today with Mary Green, the famous Mary Green, I might say, of newspaper column fame, and who lives on East 24th in Benton. And we're delighted to be in her living room. The broadcast made possible by WCBL, Shelby McCallum owner. And we'll remind you that copies of this will be available at the Marshall County Library and at the State Archives in Frankfort. Mary Green, my mother-in-law, talks a lot about you. What does she and you have in common?
Dear friend. We worked together at the old Benton hosiery mill, and I loved her very much.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Now, we always start off with a question that some ladies are embarrassed about, and that is, when were you born?
1907.
So you're getting on up into the 80s now.
Yes.
And were you born in Marshall County?
I was. Out on the Dogtown Road, where the John Stroud home is now.
Nearly everybody seems to be wrapped up in genealogy today. For the benefit of those people who may listen to this tape, would you tell us your father and mother?
Yes. Holly Harrison and Lionel Wade Harrison. That's my mother.
All right. Do you remember any grandparents?
Yes. There's my grandfather's picture. Thomas Harrison, he was a primitive Baptist preacher. And on church days, he let me sit in the pulpit with him. He thought I was a pretty silly girl he ever did see.
Yeah.
And I would sit in the pulpit. And back then, we didn't have any lotion to put on our hair, to keep it pretty. Mm-hmm. And my mother would take a spoon of sugar and put it in the washpan and curl my hair, and those curls would just stay. We didn't have any screens over the little church window, and sometimes I'd think the flies and the waspers would get me for sure.
Well, that's a delightful story. I suppose they had kerosene lamps.
Yes, kerosene lamps. And now, Ollie, she passed away, my sister, the 8th of March. She bought one of those lamps, and Helen Edwards bought the other one, and they had them converted into electric lights, and they're from out of this world.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people treasure those today, of course. You mentioned going to church. What about a brush arbor?
Oh, yes. Yes, Brother Shields, Castleberry, and Boone. Did you ever know them?
I remember Boone Castleberry.
Well, he was a preacher, and they'd carry on just right across the road from the schoolhouse. And Boone went to school at Brazil, where I did. And I'd always try to get close to Boone. I thought he'd guide my steps right of getting down through that woods to the brush arbor meet. Uh-huh. I can just smell that the freshness in the leaves. Mm-hmm. We had the little choir and the lanterns strewn all over the woods. It was a lovely time.
Well, in that sense, it was the good old days.
It was the good old days. Mm-hmm. We was a very, very happy family. We all had a sense of humor about us. We had a lot of tragedy, but we didn't let it get us down.
Well, the Harrison family is rather famous. There are not too many families in American history that have had presidents. And there were two President Harrison.
Yes, uh-huh.
One of them, the grandson of the other.
Yes, I know. Well, my grandfather Harrison was wonderful, but my grandfather Wade was the one that we could do him. He'd let us comb his hair and cut the hair and his eyebrows off, But my grandfather Harrison was strictly business. Mm-hmm. Now, when he pointed, that meant sit down. I never will forget one time. There was having an association, And Grandpa Harrison would just come and stay at my daddy's, you know, so he wouldn't have to go backwards and forth. They lived at Oak Level. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, if they ever do bow their heads, I'm going to get an extra piece of that chicken. They bowed their head, and Grandfather was asking the blessing. I just reached over. He said, "Sit down, Mary."
Right in the prayer?
He left the prayer, said, "Sit down, Mary. You can have a piece of chicken in a minute." That is the truth. My mother could have murdered me.
She must have been embarrassed.
No, could just let it pass.
Yeah.
That was Mary for you.
Uh-huh.
You know, she used to say, "Mary, you just haven't got any gumption." And I thought my mother knew everything. And I said, "Well, will I ever have any gumption?" She said, "I doubt it." And I thought, well, if gumption, anybody has it, my mother's got it. And I wanted to be whatever it was. And I just prayed to get grown so I would have gumption.
Well, you mentioned going to Brazil school. Did you go all of your grammar school curriculum there?
U.S. Sled was my first teacher. And Raleigh Colley was my second one. Nanny Wood Morgan was the third. Zero Grubbs was the fourth. Jack Gatlin was the fifth. He was a doll. Mm-hmm. And Jack Gatlin, and then Noah Thompson, Amber Thompson's wife. And then James Woodall Bryan. You probably knew. He made a doctor.
Yes, sir.
He died 4 years ago this July. Now, we had him 2 years. He was one that inspired me to write.
I was going to ask you how, if back in your school days you liked to write.
All of my life. We'd go to the store, and when Ollie would buy candy, I'd buy me a tablet and pencil. And I had my mother to say, "Well, where's Mary?" And Lucy, I would say, "She's out yonder under the rose bush a writing."
Well, I'm sure many people did this. I know I did as a young man growing up. The family took the Tribune as the only paper for a long time. And your column was always...
I began writing in 29 for E.C. Olds.
Uh-huh. Olds did a history of Marshall County.
Oh, well, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. E.C. Olds. Maybe one of the Levitt boys was in with him. I just can't remember. But I wrote for E.C. Olds and then just on down the line, and now I'm with the Star, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I just never could spell. And my daddy was the cause of that. I've tried to think today. He'd, like, soul wash, he'd say. S-O-So, W-S-H, wash. Mm-hmm. So wash. He'd want me to cut it in the syllables.
Uh-huh.
And I never did learn to spell that away or straight either. I can spell nothing. Can't now.
Well, I hadn't thought of that in a while, but I can remember some of the older people saying that that's the way they were taught to spell.
That's the way my daddy was taught. The same way with arithmetic. Me and him couldn't get along together on arithmetic.
Well, if you weren't taught that way, it's a little confusing.
Yes, it was confusing.
Right, you love to write, and tell us some other things about the school. Did you have spelling bees?
Oh, yes, and box suppers and ice cream suppers.
What was a box supper like?
Well, the girls would all make them a box, cover them and decorate them, and then be full of goodies to eat, sandwiches and, you know, special things.
Maybe a pie.
And then they'd bid them off, and of course the boys knew which box their sweetheart had. And that's where the trouble come in, you know.
Some of them would bid against them.
No, they knew that they'd run that box, they'd run that up.
Mm-hmm.
and spelling bees, arithmetic matches. We had a wonderful time.
They called that sappering, didn't they, sometimes?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good. Now, what about, did you ever have any discipline problems at school?
Well, yes. I told you, they went barefooted. And you know about how your feet looked after the floor was oiled.
I remember those oil floors.
And I was weak in arithmetic. Excuse me. And I was going to high school in September, so Helen Morgan, the real school started in July, and Helen told me to come up there for 2 months, and she'd help me with arithmetic. Well, me and Gladys Hauser got tickled one day, and I thought we was grown. She wouldn't bother us. And she wanted to know what we was tickled about. I don't remember. But she said, Mary, you go stand behind the bookcase. And Gladys, you may go to the cloakroom. Well, we was standing there. I could look over the top of the little bookcase. And there was a pretty car driving up, and 2 dressed up men came in, and they introduced themselves. Mr. DeVasier and Clyde Philbeck and Terry Wade was through it. And they was going to the rural schools and getting pupils' names that was going to enter high school in September. And Miss Helen, she said, yes, I have 2, Mary Harrison and Gladys Thompson. She said, Mary, will you all come forward?
So you came out from behind
the bookcase, and my feet looked that long. Gladys likewise. I never did love Helen anymore. Oh, well, yes, I did, but I thought she could have just let me have stood there.
Yeah.
But I was grown, ready for high school.
Well, that is the most interesting experience, and a little bit humiliating to you at the time.
At the time, I tell you, when I started the school to them in the fall and had my shoes on and all dressed up, they didn't know it was the same little girl that was behind the book.
All right, now, you did start the high school, I presume, at Benton?
Yeah.
Benton.
Meta Mathis, Garfield Pope.
Oh, Garfield Cope was one of your teachers.
Yeah. And Garfield, Terry Wade, and Miss Riley. Her husband was a missionary Baptist preacher, but I can't remember her given name. Mm-hmm. But we all loved her. And Meta Mathis, well, I mentioned her, didn't I?
Yes.
And Terry Wade.
What do you like most about high school?
Well, writing composition.
Mm-hmm. Composition.
You know, lots of times we'd get in class and I'd write 2 or 3 compositions for the girls, you know, that would ask me, and I could get them, you know, fixed up for them, and it'd come time for them to read them. Well, they'd read the composition no matter what subject I'd make.
Oh, that's a talent that you
I just always wanted to write. I loved Ray Stewart. I could just read after him forever. I never missed one of his books or anything.
Yeah, I like Jesse Stewart. He was a good, down-to-earth writer.
When he had that heart attack, you know, at Murray.
Mm-hmm. Well, you eventually got married.
Oh, yes. I quit high school in my 3rd year and went. Elizabeth Smith, Lyles, and I went to the hosier mill and got us a job. Well, Wilbert Owens, did you ever know him? Wilbert and Charlie Bondrum come down to the hosier mill to get us. They didn't aim for us to quit school. But we was done hard doing. Well, I made more money than the school teachers did at that hosier mill. Mm-hmm. That's where Ruth and I met.
Yes.
And we was very close to each other. I named one of her boys, Pat Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Douglas.
Yes.
She could tell you.
Yeah.
I know I went up there to see her and the little new baby. And her mother was staying with them, and she had washed, and she just threw the clothes over on the bed till she got time to get them made up.
Now, she was originally Nettie Green. Was that related to your husband?
No, well, they might have been distantly related. But I said, well, Ruth, where are you at? She said, I'm here under this pile of clothes. And I just see Janie Bell. She was a lovely little girl. Yeah. And Betty, too.
And where did you meet your husband?
In high school. I wrote him a note and told him I had him a sweetheart picked out. It was Rainy Wood. And he wrote back and said, anything as pretty as you are, I done got her picked out. And
so
that is where the romance started.
Started right in high school, and then you dated, and you were married shortly after.
I'm 25. Yes, about 5 years.
Now,
but I've had a very happy life. I've had lots of heartaches, but I just think, well, maybe the Lord loves me and thinks my shoulders is strong enough to carry it.
You had some children.
Seven.
Well, tell us something about that.
Well, of course, I think they're the grandest things, and I've got 33 grandchildren.
33?
7 of them are great-grands. But as you can see the pictures, 33, and they're everyone perfect. I mean, no disease or no, they're just perfect.
Well, the Lord blessed you there.
Yes, He did. But it took a blessing to raise 7 through a depression. Did you know it?
I well remember it. Of course, I didn't worry much about it when the depression started. I was, 8 years old, 7. And, kids don't worry much.
No, they don't.
I'm kind of like President Eisenhower said one time, we were poor, but I didn't know it.
Well, I thought we was rich because we was just loved one another so there at home. And we didn't argue.
Did you live on the farm?
Yes. A great big old farm down in the Woods neighborhood, down close to Brazil School, and the little church that I went to and go to.
You still go to the same place?
Yes.
Well, that's a string of continuity in your life.
Yes, sure is.
Kept you anchored to the same spot.
I didn't have a chance to know anything on a hard shell Baptist.
Well, now, are any of these children nearby so they can sort of visit you?
Oh, well, they're here all... Well, 2 of them's been here all day today. They're in and out all the time. I don't never get lonesome.
Well, that's fine.
With the television and the Bible and the little radio.
Children and grandchildren.
And good reading. I don't get lonesome.
Well, that is wonderful. So many people complain that, they get separated and the children go to Alaska or somewhere and they just don't see much.
Wade, he lives in Paris. He's further away than any of them. Wade Green, he's the manager of the National Store in Paris.
Now that's Tennessee. All right.
And my grandson won the $5,000 fishing boat at the fish fry. They have this big fish fry.
The world's biggest.
Yeah. And you had 5 chances. And Wade was aiming to come last Sunday and bring the boat. And so all the family and all the grandchildren could see Steve's boat.
When you heard about the tornado in Paris, it scared you, I guess, didn't it?
Well, I reckon it did. Wade called us at midnight and told us it's all right. But he saw the funnel cloud. He'd started to the drugstore, and he said, when I saw that, I turned and went back to the store. And, I was scared to death. called and told me he's fixing to take him a boat ride, and his wife and 3 children, and I begged him not to. Well, he said, Mother, he can't sing. I said, that's what they said about the Titanic.
That's right.
I said, don't ever think it can't.
But anything is sinking.
That's right. But it is a beauty. He said he'd been offered $4,500, but he said, we're going to keep it till the new wears out. He's a lovely boy, a good boy.
He likes fishing, I guess.
Well, not so much. He would never have bought a skiff or anything to have went fishing in it, but now he couldn't keep from getting on the water in that. And I said, I'm just afraid you'll let little Jonathan jump off. He said, Mother. The phone rang the other night, Mr. Ray, and this maid said, Mother, Stevie, he's the hunter of the family, has won a $300 coon hound. And he wanted us to call it, we want you to name it.
Well,
what an honor. Call from Paris for me to name that coon dog.
well, what did you name it?
Cracker Jack. And he got killed last week. Got out in the middle of the highway.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Children are probably fond of him.
Well, little Jonathan said we buried him and put flowers on his little grave, and we made a cross, Granny.
You know, talking about things like that, I hadn't thought of it in a long time, but I can remember taking a matchbox and burying a dead baby chicken.
I've done the same thing. Yes, sir.
My mother always had chickens, of course, on farm.
Yeah. We had little chicken graveyards, little cat and dog graveyards. Children, I made Marilyn a playhouse once, and she said, well, Mother, what do with it? I just come in the house. Now, what do with it? You know, I don't think children has enough to occupy their mind. But nowadays, the mothers run to the store and get them something. Mm-hmm. I know they say, Granny, you're going to town? Yes. Well, get me something. You know, just something. I had a little girl next door down here, came up here the other day, and it's Solon White's little granddaughter. And I said, honey, did your mama ever cut you out of a paper doll? She didn't know what I was talking about. I got us a box and got some of my goodwill cards and made a bunch of furniture, you know, and fixed them all in this box. And that child sat here and played for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And I said, well, honey, that's what my little girls played with. And she said, well, I'm your little girl, too.
Well, fine.
And she's a little doll, and she came back and had 3 little kittens up in her arm. And she calls me Granny sometime, and she said, Granny, have you got any bananas? I said, yes. Well, I'll give you one of these kittens if you will give me a banana.
Well, that's fine. Before we run out of time, I'd like to ask you about your biggest thrill in writing, or do you remember a column you did or a news story that seemed more important to you than some of the others?
Yeah, Bill Powell has been an inspiration to me, and Fred Newman was one of my best with the Sun Democrat.
Oh, he wrote a history of Paducah. I remember Mr.
I
Newman.
had that history. His wife sent it to me. And Gladys Tabors with the family circle. We had just the sweetest friendship, but she died 2 years ago in March. And when I'd want a little pen money, I'd sit down and write Edwin Finch with the Courier Journal.
Yes.
And write me an article or 2, and you'd come $2 or $3 or $4 back for it.
Yes.
So I've been a pretty happy woman.
Well, that's good. That's certainly when you can look back contentedly on life.
Going through life, I was busy storing good memories to relive when I grew up.
Well, as I said, the time goes pretty rapidly, and we're down just to a couple of minutes. Do you have something real special you'd like to get on this tape before we wind it up?
Well, I love people. I just love people. And I don't know, you do the talking. If you used to sit here and talk, I'd still be a rattling.
Well, most writers have said that your life experiences are what you write about. Now, I helped start the Jesse Stewart Workshop at Murray State.
Oh, I wanted to go to that so bad.
And I know one of the main things Jesse would say over and over, now write of what you know about, what you live, what you've experienced.
That is what I do. And the most of it now is just here at Lane's End and their children and grandchildren. And they all have pen names, and most of them all have pen names now. And I was thinking, our baby said I counted 120 different children that I've babysat for. I've got doctors and nurses, and a lawyer or two in that bunch, and one or two convicts.
Whatever happens, you can call on an expert.
Yeah. And I enjoyed every bit of it. Never had any trouble with the parent. The experience I had with one family, I went and stayed a week, and the mother and daddy was going to Alabama to hunt another place, and there's 3 very sweet children. And I wrote each one of them a letter. And they had a beautiful Bible, and I put these in the Bible, these letters, just one page. And I wrote a note and said, when you all find these letters, please write Granny Green a letter. I've never got a letter, so I figured they never did find them in the Bible.
That reminds me of a story that I heard once about a young man whose father had promised him $1,000, and so he wrote a check and gave him a Bible and told him when he read through that, some blessing would come to him. So, 5 or 6 years later, the boy said, "Dad, what happened to that $1,000 you were going to give me?" He said, "Did you ever read the Bible through?" And that check had been there all the time.
Well, these letters, I know the children. I was surprised that the mother didn't write me a note, but I've never heard from them.
Well, thank you, Mary Green. I wish we had longer. This is Ray Mofield. We've been visiting at the end of the lane, or Lane's End, I believe she calls it, East 24th and Benton, or West 24th, I should say, in Benton, Kentucky. And Mary has had a wonderful career, and you've just heard her story. We return you now to our studios.